Captain Lee Dongwu stood in front of the big window on his spaceship called New Dawn and looked at the stars. The ship had been flying through space for 3 months now, heading toward a place called the Kepler system. This was the first time humans were going to meet aliens, and everyone was very excited about it. The aliens they were going to meet called themselves the Rilani, and they had blue skin like the ocean. Back on Earth, the Rilani had sent friendly messages to Earth saying they wanted humans to join something called the Harmony Council. They said it was a big group where hundreds of different alien species all worked together and shared things with each other. On the ship with Captain Lee was Dr. Park Sojin, who knew everything about aliens. Even though she had never seen one before, she had spent years studying the messages from the Rilani and learning their language. She was so excited she could barely sleep at night. The Rilani had told them that war did not exist anymore in space, and that all the smart alien species had learned to live in peace. Dr. Park would walk around the ship telling everyone about how wonderful everything was going to be. She said the galaxy was like one big happy family where everyone helped each other. She had read every single message the Rilani sent, and they all talked about love and friendship and working together to make the universe a better place. Ambassador Kiltahein was also on the ship, and his job was to talk to the aliens and make friends with them. He was a very good speaker and knew many languages. He practiced Rilani words every day so he could talk to them properly. When they arrived, he would be the first human to shake hands with an alien engineer. Kim Jae-sung took care of all the machines on the ship. He made sure the engines worked and the lights stayed on and the air was clean to breathe. He was very good with his hands and could fix anything that broke. Kim was quiet most of the time, but he noticed everything that happened around him. Communications officer Yoon Hana was in charge of all the messages that came to the ship. She listened to radio signals from space and talked to Earth to tell them how the trip was going. She had very good ears and could hear things that other people missed. She spent most of her time wearing headphones and listening to sounds from the stars. When they finally reached the Rilani planet, everyone pressed their faces against the windows to look. The planet was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. It was covered in blue oceans that sparkled like diamonds, and floating cities made of crystal hung in the sky like magic. The cities looked like they were made of glass and light, and they moved slowly through the clouds. Captain Lee felt his heart beating fast as they flew closer to the planet. This was the moment that would change everything for humans. They were about to become part of something much bigger than just Earth. They would learn new things and meet new friends and maybe even visit other planets with strange creatures. The Rilani sent them a message welcoming them to their world. The alien voice sounded like music and spoke perfect human language. The Rilani said they were very happy to meet humans and wanted to show them all the wonderful things in their civilization. They promised that humans would love being part of the Harmony Council. Dr. Park was so excited she was jumping up and down. She kept saying this was the greatest day in human history. Finally, humans would not be alone in the universe. They would have alien friends and learn about amazing technologies and see things that no human had ever imagined. When their ship landed on the planet, a group of Rilani came to meet them. The aliens were tall and thin, with smooth blue skin that seemed to glow slightly. Their eyes were big and kind-looking, and they smiled with their mouths full of white teeth. They wore long flowing clothes that seemed to be made of light itself. Ambassador Kill stepped out of the ship first, and the Rilani leader came forward to greet him. The alien spoke in perfect human language and said, "Welcome to their world." The Rilani leader had a gentle voice and talked about how happy they were that humans had finally joined the galactic community. The Rilani showed them around their city and everything was perfect. The buildings were made of materials that humans had never seen before, and they seemed to grow from the ground like plants, but they were strong like metal. The streets were clean and there was no garbage anywhere, and beautiful music played softly in the air. The Rilani people they met were friendly and polite. They asked questions about Earth and seemed very interested in human culture. They wanted to know about human art and music and food. The aliens said they had been watching Earth for a long time and thought humans were very special. Dr. Park asked if she could meet aliens from other species, and the Rilani said yes, of course, but not today because they were still arriving from other planets. She asked when she could meet them, and the Rilani said soon, very soon, but they needed to prepare. First Engineer Kim noticed something strange. While they were walking through the city, he saw what looked like big metal tubes pointing up at the sky, hidden behind the pretty crystal buildings. The tubes looked like weapons, but when he asked about them, the Rilani said they were for studying the stars. Communications officer Yoon Hana heard strange sounds in her headphones while they were visiting the planet. The sounds were not like the peaceful music the Rilani usually sent. Instead, they sounded like people talking fast and scared, but the sounds were too far away for her to understand what they were saying. That night, when they were back on their ship, Kim told Captain Lee about the metal tubes he had seen. The captain listened carefully and told Kim to keep watching and tell him if he saw anything else. Stranger Hana also told the captain about the scary sounds she had heard. She said they sounded like emergency messages, but they were in a language she did not understand. The sounds came from far away in space, not from the Rilani planet. Dr. Park spent the evening writing notes about everything she had learned. She was still very excited, but she started to wonder why the Rilani would not let her meet other alien species right away. She thought maybe they were just being careful. But it seemed a little strange. Ambassador Kill had dinner with some R'hllani leaders, and they talked about Earth and humans. The aliens asked many questions about human wars and fighting. They seemed very interested in how humans solved problems with violence. The ambassador thought this was strange because the R'hllani said they lived in peace. Late that night, Kim could not sleep, so he went for a walk around the area where they were staying. He saw a small R'hllani hiding in the shadows watching the human ship. The small alien looked scared, and when Kim walked closer, it whispered one word in broken human language. Help. Before Kim could say anything back, adult R'hllani appeared and quickly took the small alien away. They said sorry for bothering him and that the small one was just curious about humans, but Kim saw fear in the small alien's eyes and it made him feel worried. Captain Lee called his team together the next morning and they talked about all the strange things they had noticed: the metal tubes that looked like weapons, the scary sounds from space, the small alien asking for help, and the R'hllani not wanting them to meet other species. Something was not right about this perfect, peaceful planet, and the humans were starting to realize that maybe the R'hllani were not telling them the whole truth about the galaxy. The next morning, Kim Jae-soon woke up early because he could not stop thinking about the small R'hllani who had asked for help. He decided to walk around their guest area before anyone else was awake. The Crystal City looked different in the early morning light, and Kim noticed things he had missed before. As he walked past some tall blue trees, Kim heard a soft sound like someone crying. He looked around carefully and saw the same small R'hllani from the night before hiding behind one of the crystal buildings. The small alien was shaking and its big eyes were full of tears. Kim walked slowly toward the small R'hllani and knelt down to be at the same level. The alien looked at him with hope and fear mixed together in its expression. Kim, who spoke very softly and asked what was wrong. The small R'hllani looked around to make sure no one was watching, then pointed toward a large building in the distance. The building looked different from the others. It had no windows and seemed to be made of darker material. The small R'hllani whispered words that Kim did not understand, but the fear in its voice was clear. Then it said one more word in human language: run. Before Kim could ask any questions, adult R'hllani appeared from nowhere and surrounded them. They spoke quickly in their own language and their voices sounded angry. The small R'hllani was taken away and Kim was told that there had been a misunderstanding. Children sometimes got confused and said strange things. Kim returned to the ship and immediately told Captain Lee what had happened. The captain listened carefully and his face became serious. He told Kim to be very careful and to watch everything the R'hllani did. He also told him not to go anywhere alone anymore that day. While Ambassador Kill was having meetings with R'hllani leaders, Communications Officer Yoon Hana was working hard to understand the strange signals she kept hearing. She had special equipment that could pick up radio messages from very far away, and the messages she was hearing did not sound peaceful at all. Yoon Hana put on her headphones and listened very carefully to the signals. The sounds were coming from different directions in space, and they all sounded urgent and scared. She could hear what sounded like explosions in the background and voices shouting orders. The messages were in languages she had never heard before, but they all had the same feeling of panic. She worked for hours trying to decode the messages and finally managed to understand some words. The messages were talking about battles and ships being destroyed and people asking for help. Some of the messages mentioned the R'hllani by name, but not in a friendly way. They called the R'hllani destroyers and enslavers. Dr. Park Sojin was studying the biological samples the R'hllani had given her. She was supposed to learn about R'hllani biology so humans and aliens could work together better. But when she looked at the samples under her microscope, she found things that made her stomach feel sick. The R'hllani DNA was not natural. It had been changed many times by someone who knew advanced science. There were parts of the DNA that came from other species mixed together, like ingredients in a terrible recipe. Dr. Park realized that the R'hllani had been experimenting on other living beings and changing their bodies. She found DNA from at least 12 different species all mixed into the R'hllani samples. Some of the DNA came from species that looked like they had been very intelligent before they were changed. Dr. Park felt scared when she realized what this meant. The R'hllani were not just peaceful aliens, they were doing horrible things to other creatures. Engineer Kim was given permission to tour more of the R'hllani city, but everywhere he went, there were R'hllani guards watching him. He pretended to be interested in their technology, but he was really looking for clues about what they were hiding. He noticed that many areas of the city were blocked. Often no one was allowed to go there during the tour. Kim saw more of the metal tubes he had noticed before. They were definitely weapons, and they were pointed not just at the sky but also at different areas of the planet itself. Kim realized that the R'hllani were ready to fight anyone who tried to cause trouble, even on their own world. Kim also noticed that there were very few young R'hllani in the city. Most of the aliens he saw were adults, and they all acted the same way. They smiled and spoke politely, but their eyes looked empty, like they were not really thinking their own thoughts. This made Kim wonder if the R'hllani were controlling each other somehow. That evening, the human team met secretly in Captain Lee's room on the ship. They shared everything they had learned, and the picture that emerged was terrifying. The Peaceful Harmony Council was not real. The galaxy was actually full of war and suffering, and the R'hllani were the ones causing it. Dr. Park showed them the evidence from the DNA samples. She explained that the R'hllani had been taking other species and changing their bodies and minds to make them into slaves or soldiers. The beautiful blue aliens were not peaceful at all. They were monsters who had been lying to everyone knew. Hana played recordings of the messages she had intercepted. The sounds of battle and desperate calls for help filled the room. Even though they could not understand all the words, the fear and pain in the voices was clear. The galaxy was not at peace. It was in the middle of a huge war. Kim told them about the weapons hidden throughout the city and the empty look in the Rilani eyes. He said he thought the Rilani might be controlling their own people, somehow making them act like perfect, peaceful citizens, when they were really something much darker. Captain Lee looked at his team and realized they were in terrible danger. The Rilani had invited humans to their planet, not to make friends but to study them and figure out how to control them. To Earth was going to be the next planet to fall under Rilani control, unless someone warned them. Ambassador Kill had been having his own strange experiences with the Rilani leaders. They kept asking questions about human wars and weapons. They wanted to know how humans fought each other and what kind of technology Earth had for making war. The questions seemed innocent, but now they made sense in a frightening way. The Rilani were planning to use humans as warriors in their galactic empire. They thought humans would make good soldiers because Earth had so many wars, but they did not understand that humans fought each other because they cared about things like freedom and justice, not because they enjoyed hurting people. Late that night, Dr. Park made another discovery that confirmed their worst fears. She found evidence that the Rilani had been watching Earth for many years. They had detailed information about human biology and had already figured out ways to control human minds. And both the aliens had invited other species to join the Harmony Council before, and those species had all disappeared. The galaxy was full of empty planets where civilizations used to live but were now gone. The Rilani had been conquering worlds for thousands of years and no one had ever escaped. To tell the truth, Captain Lee realized they had to find a way to escape and warn Earth, but it would not be easy. The Rilani were watching them all the time and their ship was surrounded by alien technology that could stop them from leaving. The humans were trapped on a planet full of enemies who were pretending to be friends. They made plans to gather more evidence and find a way to escape. Kim remembered the small Rilani who had asked for help. Maybe there were others on this planet who wanted to be free from Rilani control. Maybe the humans were not completely alone in this fight. The peaceful lie was falling apart and underneath it was something much darker than any of them had imagined. The galaxy was not ready for peace. It was waiting for someone brave enough to fight for freedom, and the humans were about to discover just how dangerous the truth could be. Captain Lee Dongwoo decided it was time to stop pretending. He gathered all the evidence his team had found and requested a meeting with the highest Rilani leaders. He knew this was dangerous, but they needed to know exactly what they were dealing with before they could make any plans to escape. The meeting took place in the biggest crystal building in the city. Ambassador Kill Taehyun came with Captain Lee, while the rest of the team stayed on the ship and prepared for whatever might happen. The Rilani leaders were waiting for them in a huge room with walls that seemed to be made of flowing water. High Counselor Belthanis was the most important Rilani leader, and he looked different from the others. His blue skin was darker and his eyes were cold like ice. When Captain Lee showed him the evidence of the secret war and the genetic experiments, the Rilani leaders did not seem surprised at all. Instead of getting angry or trying to explain, the High Counselor started to smile, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a predator makes when it catches its prey. The other Rilani in the room also stopped pretending to be peaceful, and their expressions became hard and cruel. High Counselor Velthanis began to speak, and his voice was no longer gentle and musical. Instead, it was sharp and commanding. He told Captain Lee that humans were not the first species to discover the truth about the Rilani Empire. Many other civilizations had figured out what was really happening, and all of them had ended up as slaves or dead. The High Counselor explained that the Rilani had been ruling the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Every species that seemed promising was invited to join the Harmony Council and then studied carefully. The Rilani would learn everything about the new species before deciding how to use them best. Some species became workers who built things for the Rilani Empire. Other species became soldiers who fought in the endless wars to conquer more worlds. The smartest species became scientists who were forced to create new technologies for their Rilani masters. And some species were just used for experiments to make the Rilani stronger. Captain Lee felt his heart pounding as he realized how much danger Earth was in. The Rilani had been watching humans for decades and they were very interested in human warfare. They had seen how creative humans could be when it came to fighting, and they wanted to use that creativity for their own purposes. The High Counselor told them that humans would make perfect soldiers because they were so good at violence. Unlike other species, humans seemed to enjoy finding new ways to hurt their enemies. The Rilani planned to capture millions of humans and turn them into an unstoppable army, but the Rilani had made a big mistake. They thought that because humans fought wars on Earth, they would be easy to control. They did not understand that human violence came from human emotions like love for family and home and anger at injustice. Humans did not fight because they were naturally cruel. They fought to protect what they cared about. Ambassador Kill pretended to be interested in negotiating with the Rilani. He asked questions about how the process would work and what would happen to Earth. He acted like he was considering accepting their offer, but really he was buying time for his team to figure out how to escape. While the captain and ambassador were talking to the Rilani leaders back on the ship, Dr. Park Sojin was working frantically to find a weakness in Rilani biology. She had been studying their DNA and technology for days, and finally she found something that might help them. The R'Lani used special implants in their brains that connected them to all their advanced technology. Without these implants, they could not control their machines or communicate with each other over long distances. Dr. Park realized that if she could find a way to disrupt these implants, the R'Lani would become helpless. Engineer Kim Jae-sung was also busy making changes to their ship. He had been quietly modifying the engines and weapon systems, turning their peaceful exploration vessel into something that could fight. The work was dangerous because if the R'Lani noticed what he was doing, they would all be killed immediately. Communications officer Yoon Hana had been listening to more signals from across the galaxy, and she discovered that there were other species still fighting against the R'Lani. The war was not completely one-sided. There were rebel groups hiding in distant star systems, and they were desperately looking for help. The 3 team members on the ship worked together to create a plan. They would have to rescue their captain and ambassador, fight their way through the R'Lani city defenses, and somehow get their ship off the planet without being destroyed. But even if they succeeded, they would be starting a war with an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Dr. Park finished creating a biological weapon that would attack the R'Lani neural implants. She made it look like a medical scanner so the aliens would not be suspicious. Kim completed his modifications to the ship and armed it with weapons the R'Lani who had never seen before, and Yoon Hana prepared to send a message to Earth that would warn them about what was coming back in the Crystal Building. Captain Lee and Ambassador Kill were running out of time to stall. The High Counselor was getting impatient, and he had started making threats about what would happen if the humans did not cooperate. He showed them images of other species that had refused to join the R'Lani Empire, and what had been done to their home worlds. The images were horrible: empty planets covered in ash where beautiful cities used to stand, entire species turned into mindless slaves who did not even remember their own names, children taken from their families and changed into something that was no longer recognizably what they used to be. High Counselor Velthanis told them that Earth would suffer the same fate if humans tried to resist. R'Lani had weapons that could destroy planets and armies of enslaved soldiers from 1,000 different worlds. Humanity was just one small species on one small planet, and they had no chance of winning a war against such a powerful enemy. But Captain Lee looked the High Counselor in the eyes and said something that surprised all the R'Lani in the room. He said that humans who had been fighting impossible battles for their entire history, and they had learned that sometimes the side that should lose actually wins because they refuse to give up. The captain explained that humans had a saying that went something like this: "It is not the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog." The R'Lani might have bigger armies and better weapons, but they had never faced an enemy that simply would not stay defeated. Ambassador Kill added that the R'Lani had made their biggest mistake by lying to humans about the nature of the galaxy. If they had been honest from the beginning, maybe humans would have been willing to work with them. But now that humans knew the truth, they would never stop fighting until every enslaved species was free. The High Counselor laughed and said that humans would learn the same lesson that every other species had learned. The R'Lani Empire was too big and too strong to be defeated by anyone. But as he was speaking, alarms started going off throughout the Crystal City. Dr. Park had activated her biological weapon, and R'Lani technology was failing all over the planet. Kim had begun his attack on the city defenses, and explosions were lighting up the sky, and Hana was broadcasting the truth about the R'Lani Empire to every species in the galaxy. The deadly game was over, and the real war was about to begin. The Crystal City erupted into chaos as Dr. Park Sojin's biological weapon spread through the air. Every R'Lani neural implant began to malfunction at the same time, causing their advanced technology to shut down all over the planet. The floating crystal buildings started to fall from the sky, and the beautiful lights went out one by one. Engineer Kim Jae-sung had rigged their guest quarters with explosives that he had made from cleaning supplies and spare parts from their ship. When the bombs went off, the explosion was so loud it could be heard across the entire city. Smoke and fire filled the air, giving the humans cover to begin their escape. Counselor Velthanis screamed in rage as his armor stopped working and his weapons became useless chunks of metal. Captain Lee and Ambassador Kill fought their way out of the crystal building while R'Lani guards stumbled around blindly, unable to use their technology to coordinate their attacks. But something even more amazing was happening in the underground chambers beneath the city. As the R'Lani control systems failed, the locks on thousands of prison cells opened automatically. Creatures from hundreds of different worlds had been waiting for this moment for decades, and now they were finally free. A huge reptilian warrior named Kestar had been captured by the R'Lani 50 years ago and forced to fight in their gladiator pits. He still remembered his homeworld and his family. Even though the R'Lani had tried to make him forget, when his cell door opened, he let out a roar that shook the entire underground. Police Kestar began freeing other prisoners and organizing them into fighting groups. Some were too weak or scared to fight, but others had been waiting their whole lives for a chance to get revenge against their captors. The underground chambers became a battlefield as freed slaves fought against R'Lani guards. Dr. Park had included a special chemical in her biological weapon that would make the freed prisoners feel stronger and more alert for a short time. She knew they would need every advantage they could get. The prisoners were weak from years of captivity, but now they had hope, and that made them dangerous. Communications officer Hana was coordinating the entire rebellion from the ship. She had managed to hack into the Rilani communication systems and was broadcasting instructions to the freed prisoners in dozens of different languages. She told them where to find weapons and how to avoid the areas that were still dangerous. The freed prisoners came in all shapes and sizes. Some looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws. Others were made of living crystal that could cut through metal like butter. There were creatures that could fly and creatures that could burrow through solid rock. The diversity of the galaxy was finally working together against their common enemy. Captain Lee had split his team into two groups. Ambassador Kill and Yunhana fought their way back to the New Dawn to prepare it for takeoff and to send a message to Earth warning them about what was coming. The captain himself led Dr. Park and Kim deeper into the city to rescue as many prisoners as possible. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Rilani had grown soft and lazy after thousands of years of easy victories. They had relied on their technology to do most of the fighting for them. When that technology failed, they discovered that they had forgotten how to fight with their own hands. The freed prisoners, on the other hand, had been dreaming of this moment for years. They knew exactly what they wanted to do to their captors, and they had nothing left to lose. The halls of the Crystal City ran with blue Rilani blood as decades of rage and hatred finally found an outlet. Kim had brought weapons from their ship, but he also showed the prisoners how to make bombs and traps from ordinary objects. The aliens learned quickly, and soon every corridor in the city was full of deadly surprises waiting for Rilani reinforcements. Dr. Park was using her medical knowledge to help wounded prisoners and to create more biological weapons. She had samples of Rilani DNA, and she used them to make viruses that would only affect the blue-skinned aliens. The viruses spread quickly through the Rilani population, making them sick and weak. As the battle raged, Captain Lee found himself fighting alongside creatures he had never imagined. A spider-like alien with 8 legs and poison fangs fought next to a blob of living metal that could change its shape at will. They could not speak the same language, but they all understood the desire for freedom. The turning point came when they reached the central control room of the city. High Counselor Velthanis had barricaded himself inside with his most loyal guards and was trying to call for help from other Rilani worlds. But Yunhana had jammed all the communication channels and no help was coming. The High Counselor had put on an older type of armor that did not depend on neural implants, and he fought like a desperate animal. He had energy weapons that could cut through metal and personal shields that deflected most attacks, but he was fighting alone against hundreds of enemies who had every reason to hate him. Captain Lee realized that killing the High Counselor would not be enough. They needed to destroy the Rilani ability to control other species. The central control room contained the master computers that coordinated the entire slave empire. If they could destroy those computers, it would cause chaos throughout Rilani space. Kim had saved his biggest bomb for this moment. It was made from the ship's emergency power cells, and it would create an explosion big enough to destroy the entire building, but someone would have to stay behind to set it off, and that person would not survive before anyone could volunteer. Kestar stepped forward. The big reptilian warrior said that he had been a prisoner for 50 years and he wanted to make sure no one else would ever suffer the way he had. He took the bomb from Kim and smiled with all his sharp teeth. The explosion could be seen from orbit, and it completely destroyed the central control complex. Along with it went the Rilani ability to coordinate their empire. The slave worlds would be on their own for the first time in millennia, and many of them would choose freedom over slavery as the humans and their new allies fought their way back to the New Dawn. Captain Lee realized that they had done something that would change the galaxy forever. They had not just escaped from the Rilani, they had started a revolution that would spread to every corner of space. The ship lifted off from the burning planet with dozens of freed prisoners aboard. Some were too injured to fight anymore, but others were eager to continue the war against their former masters. They had learned that freedom was possible, and they were willing to die to keep it. Ambassador Kill had managed to send a complete report to Earth along with all the evidence they had gathered about the Rilani Empire. The message would take months to reach home, but when it did, humanity would finally understand what kind of universe they really lived in. As the New Dawn flew away from the Rilani homeworld, Captain Lee looked back at the burning cities and felt both sadness and hope. Millions of creatures had died in the rebellion, but millions more were now free for the first time in their lives. The galaxy would never be the same. Yunhana was already receiving messages from rebel groups on other worlds. The news of the successful uprising was spreading faster than the Rilani could stop it, and enslaved species everywhere were beginning to believe that resistance was possible. The chains that had bound the galaxy for 10,000 years were finally beginning to break. But the real war was just beginning, and the humans knew that the Rilani would not give up their empire without a fight that would shake the stars themselves. 6 months after the New Dawn limped back to Earth with its cargo of freed alien prisoners, the entire planet was transformed. Earth had never seen anything like the creatures that Captain Lee brought home, but humanity quickly learned that they all shared one thing in common. They hated the Rilani Empire with every fiber of their being. The testimony of the human crew shocked every government on Earth. President Kim Min-soo of Korea stood before the United Nations and declared that this was humanity's greatest challenge since the invention of fire. Every nation on Earth regardless of their past conflicts, agreed that the R'hllani threat was more important than any earthly dispute. Park Sojin became the most important scientist on the planet as she worked with teams of researchers from every country to develop new weapons based on R'hllani weaknesses. She had brought back samples of R'hllani technology and biology, and human scientists were amazed by what they found. The aliens had made their technology dependent on their neural implants, which meant that if humans could disrupt those implants, entire R'hllani fleets would become helpless. Dr. Park created dozens of different biological weapons that could attack the alien nervous system, and she taught other scientists how to make them. Engineer Kim Jae-sung worked with the greatest engineers from America, Russia, China, and Europe to design warships that could fight the R'hllani. His experience with alien technology gave him insights that no other human had, and together they created ships that were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human warships did not try to copy R'hllani technology. Instead, they used human strengths like creativity, unpredictability, and sheer stubbornness. The ships were armored with steel from Earth's mines and powered by fusion reactors that could overload and take out entire enemy formations if necessary. The first human battle fleet was much smaller than the massive R'hllani armadas, but every ship was designed to be as dangerous as possible. Human ships could ram enemy vessels, sacrifice themselves to protect others, and fight in ways that made no sense to aliens who had grown used to predictable warfare. Officer Yoon Hana had become Earth's chief coordinator with alien rebel groups. She spent her days talking to creatures from across the galaxy, helping them organize resistance movements and coordinating attacks against R'hllani supply lines. The ability to learn new languages quickly made her invaluable. The freed prisoners who had come to Earth became teachers and advisors. They told human military leaders about R'hllani tactics, weaknesses, and technology. Some of the aliens were natural warriors who had been forced to fight in R'hllani gladiator pits, and they taught human soldiers new ways to fight. Captain Lee Dongwoo was promoted to admiral and put in charge of the first major offensive against a R'hllani stronghold. The target was a fortress world called Zarian Prime, where the R'hllani kept their reserve fleets and trained their best soldiers. It was supposed to be impossible to attack, but humans had never been very good at accepting the word impossible. Admiral Lee's fleet approached Zarian Prime using tactics that the R'hllani had never encountered before. Instead of the elegant ritualistic warfare that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, humans fought like barbarians. Human ships used suicide runs, kamikaze attacks, and psychological warfare designed to terrify and confuse their enemies. They broadcast recordings of human music and battle cries that drove R'hllani soldiers insane with fear. They used booby traps and ambush tactics that made no sense to an orderly military mind. Battle for Zarian Prime lasted 3 days, and when it was over, the R'hllani fortress was a smoking ruin. Human losses were heavy, but they had proven something important. The R'hllani Empire could be defeated. The news of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light, but the real change came from the message that Ambassador Kil Tae-hayan broadcast to every enslaved world in the galaxy. Speaking in hundreds of different languages, he told the truth about the human victory and offered hope. Two species that had been slaves for thousands of years. The message was simple but powerful. Humans had not started this war, they had simply revealed it for what it always was. The R'hllani had been winning because they convinced their victims that resistance was impossible, but humans had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people were willing to fight. As Admiral Lee's fleet spread across the galaxy, they found eager allies everywhere. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The war was no longer just humans against R'hllani. It was the entire galaxy against its oppressors. The R'hllani fought back with everything they had. They had weapons that could destroy entire star systems and armies of enslaved soldiers from 1,000 different worlds, but for every world they destroyed, 2 more joined the rebellion. The empire that had seemed unshakable was crumbling from within. On Earth, factories worked day and night to build more warships and weapons. Every human being understood that failure meant extinction, but they also understood that victory would mean freedom for trillions of creatures across the galaxy. It was a cause worth dying for. Dr. Park had made another discovery that changed everything. She found that the R'hllani had been using a drug in their water supply that made them obedient and peaceful. When she created an antidote and spread it through R'hllani space, many of the blue-skinned aliens, they began to rebel against their own leaders. Some R'hllani had never wanted to be part of an evil empire. They had just been chemically controlled like everyone else. When they became free, they joined the rebellion and brought with them knowledge of R'hllani weaknesses and secret military installations. The war spread to every corner of the galaxy as species that had been enemies for millennia united against their common oppressor. Human diplomats worked day and night to keep the alliance together, while human soldiers fought alongside creatures they had never imagined. Engineer Kim designed new types of weapons specifically for each alien species. Some rebels could fly, so he gave them aerial bombs. Others could burrow underground, so he created mining explosives that could collapse entire cities. The diversity of the galaxy became its greatest strength. Communications officer Yoon Hana had become the voice of the rebellion. Her broadcasts reached every enslaved world and inspired millions of creatures to rise up against their masters. She told them stories of human determination and courage that gave them hope when everything seemed hopeless. The R'Lani Empire had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but in less than 2 years, it was falling apart. Slave worlds declared independence every day, and former R'Lani colonies became independent nations. The map of the galaxy was being redrawn with every battle. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at a fleet that contained ships from 100 different worlds. Humans flew alongside creatures made of living gas, energy beings that existed as pure thought, and robots that had gained consciousness. The galaxy had never seen such unity. The war was far from over, and many more battles would be fought before the last R'Lani stronghold fell. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The age of slavery and oppression was ending, and the age of freedom was beginning. Ambassador Kill sent one final message to the R'Lani High Command, offering them a chance to surrender and join the new galactic community as equals. The response was predictable, but it confirmed what humans had always known. Some people would rather destroy everything than give up power. As the final battle approached, Earth prepared to send its entire fleet to the R'Lani capital world. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history, and the outcome would determine whether freedom or slavery would rule. The stars, the humans had not started this war, but they had shattered the illusion that it was already over. The galaxy was finally awake, and it was angry. 10,000 years of oppression was about to end, and humanity had lit the fuse that would bring it all crashing down. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter as billions of creatures across the galaxy prepared for the final battle that would determine their fate. Freedom was no longer just a dream, it was a destiny that they would fight for with their last breath.